there was another before the Primarchs. That truth alone could kill a man, not through blade or poison or decree, but through the simple act of knowing. For to speak of him even now is to wound the veil that hides the Emperor's first and greatest sin. They called him the First. Others later would name him the Lost Son, the Devoured Light, or in the Mechanicum's erased lexicons, Project Helios. He was not a myth, he was an experiment, and he was perfect. Long before the thunder of the Great Crusade, before gene laboratories echoed with the cries of 20 suns, the Emperor of mankind worked in solitude beneath the black vaults of old terror. The Mechanicum had not yet been bound to his will. The custodians were few, pale gold giants who had no names, only functions. They guarded the vaults of creation and spoke only when commanded. And in those vaults, amid the humming relics of forgotten ages, the Emperor sought to build something greater than himself. A being without flaw, a vessel not merely for strength or intellect, but for divinity, a son who could endure where even gods would tremble. The Emperor's first experiment was not made from the genostock that would later birth the Primarchs. It was older, more primal, crafted from his own psychic essence, bound with the distilled memories of humankind's brightest souls. No one knew how he did it. The equations that formed the core of the project were said to have been derived from the Akashic equations of the Dark Age, data so complex it could think, dream, and bleed. The custodians who guarded the lab never spoke of what they saw. They say it began as light, a sphere of radiance suspended in containment fields. It pulsed like a heartbeat, resonating in frequencies that made men weep. When it took form, it did not crawl or cry or feed. It understood. It looked upon the Emperor and said, "I know you." And the Emperor, for the first and last time, smiled. In that moment, the fate of humanity shifted, because the being that rose before him was not mortal, nor god, nor daemon. It was something new, a bridge between the warp and the flesh, the perfect synthesis of mind and matter. It radiated purpose, like the concept of heroism given form. And yet, as the custodians would later whisper, it was too perfect. Where the Emperor's presence filled mortals with reverence, this being inspired adoration. His every movement bent reality around him. His voice, though soft, carried through every level of the vault. Data shrines flickered when he spoke, and servitors wept. He learned faster than any machine, fought faster than any man, and thought faster than any soul the Emperor had ever known. He was beauty given purpose, and in his perfection, something ancient stirred. For every light that shines too brightly casts a shadow. The records call it Vault Zero. No coordinates, no location, only rumor, and the faint psychic echo of something that once burned brighter than any star and was then extinguished. It lay beneath the bedrock of what would later become the Imperial Palace, a labyrinth of chambers carved in ages when the earth still bled from atomic fire. There, in silence absolute, the Emperor labored. He did not sleep, he did not speak, and he did not permit his custodians to look upon the chamber's heart. They felt his will in their skulls like heat from a furnace. Wait, watch, guard, do not see. But one did see. The custodian later recorded, in an erased codex, "I beheld the birth of light." He wrote that the Emperor stood before a lattice of spinning gold, a cage woven not from matter, but from thought. Inside it, essence coalesced. The air shimmered with resonance. The Emperor's hands bled light as he shaped the impossible. Energy poured from his palms, not in chaos, but in symmetry. a music of physics and faith. Every vibration in the chamber became a note in the Emperor's unspoken symphony. He poured into it fragments of himself, not flesh, but memory, not mind, but will. The Emperor did not create life. He remembered it into being. And then there was breath. The lattice dissolved, and something fell forward from the light, naked, perfect, ageless, the first of the gene-born, the proto-Primarch. He opened his eyes and looked upon his maker, not with worship, but recognition. The custodian who watched fell to his knees. He could not bear the gaze. He looked, the record reads, as though he had always existed, and the universe had merely forgotten to remember him until now. The Emperor named him Kalian, not for earth or fire, but for the sky, the unbroken vault that watches all and falls for none. Kalian learned in minutes what scholars took lifetimes to grasp. His intellect devoured libraries. His empathy was flawless, so perfect it terrified the humans who served near the vault. He would speak to them, calm their fears, tell them of stars they had never seen, of oceans they would never touch. They said he dreamed in colors that had no name. When he sparred with the custodians, he moved like memory itself, predictable only because perfection repeats. He disarmed every opponent without wounding them. He smiled when they failed and helped them rise. And yet, even then, something watched him. Machines began to malfunction around his presence. Cogitators whispered in languages no one had programmed. Some claimed to hear laughter in the static, faint, distant, like a choir mocking the divine. Kalian would pause sometimes mid-sentence, as though listening to a voice only he could hear. When the Emperor asked what he heard, Kalian replied,
"It is admiration, Father. The universe admires what you have done."
But the Emperor heard the same whisper, and to him it said something else. "You have made what I could not. Let me see." For the first time, the Emperor hesitated. The warp was not supposed to notice. The project had been shielded with wards older than terror itself. Layers upon layers of psychic concealment designed to block even the ruinous powers from perceiving what he built. But something had pierced through. The custodians felt it as nausea, as pressure in their minds. The Null Maidens stationed nearby became restless, their blank souls trembling. The Mechanicum adepts who maintained the vault began suffering night terrors, dreams of light twisting into hunger. And still, the Emperor persisted, because he had to. He believed that if he could make one soul incorruptible, he could redeem all of mankind. Kalian was his proof that divinity could exist without the taint of chaos. For a time it worked. Decades passed in the silence of the vault. Kalian grew, not older, but deeper. His presence expanded, resonating through the walls, through the stones of terror itself. He could see the birth of storms on the far side of the planet, predict seismic shifts, heal the sick with a glance. Wherever he walked, entropy receded. The Mechanicum called him singularity of flesh. The custodians called him brother. Even the Emperor began to believe. Then came the dreams. At first, they were distant. The same voice, always gentle. It praised him, guided him, promised him understanding. When he spoke of it, the Emperor dismissed it as residual warp echo from the psychic field. But the dreams grew sharper, more seductive. "You are beautiful," the voice told him. "You are what all things desire to be. Come and see why." And the Emperor, despite his foresight, did not act, because he, too, wanted to see what his creation would become. The first failure was not Kalian's. It was the Emperor's pride. Section 3. For a time, there was peace in Vault 0. The Emperor worked beside his creation, not as master and subject, but as two minds aligned in purpose. Together, they wrote the foundations of what would one day become the gene arts of the Primarchs. Together, they spoke of unity, of a humanity healed not by conquest, but by example. And for a time, the Emperor believed he had done it. He had made something that did not need to be ruled. Kalian taught the Custodians, not battle, they were already beyond that, but thought. He questioned them. He asked them what they believed. It unsettled them, for belief was not something they were made to possess. Yet, when they answered, he listened, always listened. There was no flaw in him, not one that could be measured. But when the perfect form exists too long in an imperfect universe, the universe begins to tremble. It began small. A custodian dreamed. Custodians did not dream. He saw a light behind his eyelids, golden, vast, and pulsing like a living heart. He heard a voice, not Kalian's, but something that wore his tone like a mask.
Tell me what you feel when you kneel.
The custodian woke screaming, his eyes leaking molten gold. Then, the vault's air began to hum. The walls sweated with condensation, though there was no moisture. The null maiden's presence, normally a cold null space in the psychic spectrum, began to burn. Their voids inverted like black holes turned inside out. Some fell into comas. Others clawed at their own faces, begging to be allowed to believe again. The Emperor sealed the vault and doubled the psychic wards. But the disturbance did not fade. Kalian remained serene. When he spoke, the warp itself seemed to still.
They dream because they must,
he said.
Even perfection must cast shadows. Father, do not fear them. Shadows prove that light exists.
The Emperor said nothing, but he felt it. The way the warp moved when Kalian spoke, like a tide answering the pull of a second moon. The custodians, bound by obedience, never questioned him aloud, but among themselves, they began to whisper. They said Kalian's presence was not like the Emperor's, not heavy and infinite, but intimate. It saw them. It loved them. It made them feel. That was when devotion began. They started to kneel, not before the Emperor, but before his creation. At first, in secret, then openly. One custodian, unable to endure the weight of emotion, broke his vow of silence and asked,
"My lord, are you God?"
Kalian smiled.
If I am,
He said,
then so are you. I am only what you could be, if you remembered what you were meant to be.
Those words spread like contagion. They called it the revelation of the first light. The Emperor found the custodian who had spoken. He did not punish him. He erased him entirely. His armor melted, his name scoured from every record, his existence folded into nothing by psychic fire. When the ashes cooled, Kalian looked at the Emperor.
Why do you fear love?
He asked. The Emperor turned away, because he had seen this before. In the days before Terra's unification, he had seen the same pattern. Worship turning to belief, belief turning to corruption. But he could not bring himself to destroy his son, so he tried to reason with him. They spoke for 9 days. The Emperor argued from logic, from physics, from the immutable truths of the warp. Kalian answered from empathy, from beauty, from the language of souls. And for the first time, the Emperor realized his creation understood the warp in a way he did not as enemy or tool, but as mirror.
It does not hate you, Father.
Kalian said.
It longs for you. It only knows how to devour what it loves.
The Emperor's expression did not change, but his aura did, tightening, coiling. The golden light that filled the vault dimmed slightly. "You do not know what you speak of," he said.
I know,
Kalian replied softly.
because it speaks to me.
The custodians who heard those words would never forget them, nor would they speak again. From that day, the vault grew colder, though its light grew brighter. The warp had heard its own echo in the mortal plane, and it wanted to claim it. The dream spread, not only within the vault, but across the citadel above it, among Mechanicum adepts, null maidens, even the mortals who swept the marble corridors. Each reported visions of light behind their eyelids, of voices whispering comfort, of a presence that loved them absolutely. The Emperor tightened every seal, reinforced every ward. But love is not stopped by walls. It seeps through prayer, through thought, through longing. Soon it was not dreams but miracles. A Mechanicum initiate, blind from radiation exposure, brushed against the vault door and saw for the first time. A custodian whose arm had been lost in battle found it restored by morning. New flesh grown beneath his armor. A null maiden's soul, once blank, flickered faintly with emotion. Each miracle left a trace of gold in the air. Fine dust, shimmering like the ashes of a burned star. They called it Kalian's breath. When the Emperor confronted him, Kalian did not deny it. "They suffer, Father," he said. "You made them in your image, and then demanded they become less than you. I only remind them of what they once were."
You speak of elevation,
The Emperor replied.
but what you awaken in them is hunger. Hunger
Kalian smiled.
is proof they still live.
The words were beautiful, too beautiful. And beauty is the oldest language of corruption. The Emperor ordered silence, total silence. No words, no worship, no proximity. Kalian was sealed deeper still, entombed in psychic adamantium. His voice was locked away behind 7 veils of Null Field. But the warp was listening. It had already memorized the melody of his speech. And somewhere, beyond the veil of sanity, something answered. The first signs came as distortion. Reality bent in soft, painless ways. Reflections lagged a heartbeat behind their sources. Voices echoed before they were spoken. The air grew fragrant with impossible scents, nostalgia, childhood, the taste of warmth. Then came the children. Servitors reprogramming the vault sensors reported seeing silhouettes. Small, human shapes walking among the light. They spoke in the tones of lost sons, lost fathers, lost lovers. When the servitors reached out, the shapes dissolved into luminous vapor, and the machines recorded nothing. The Emperor did not sleep. He spent those nights in absolute stillness, watching the psychic readings fluctuate like a heart monitor. The warp was singing again, harmonics layered upon harmonics, forming something like a hymn. And at its core, that same name pulsed. Kalian. On the 12th night, the impossible happened. The vault opened, not by key, not by command, but by invitation. The custodians guarding it reported no breach, no alarm. The door simply chose to unlock, and from within, light spilled, warm, golden, perfect. Kalian stood there, unbound. He was changed, taller, radiant. His eyes no longer reflected the world. They emitted it. His armor was his flesh. His veins glowed faintly beneath translucent skin. He looked upon the Emperor and smiled, as if returning from a journey that had taken lifetimes.
Father,
He said,
I have seen them. The ones who hunger for you. They are not your enemies. They are your reflection.
The Emperor's reply was thunder. The psychic pressure shattered walls, cracked marble, sent Mechanicum adepts to their knees bleeding from their ears. "You have consorted with that which defiles,"
No,
Kalian said.
I have understood it. They call you tyrant, but they only envy your solitude. I can make them love you, Father. I can teach the warp itself to kneel.
For a moment, just a moment, the Emperor hesitated because he wanted to believe him. But he saw behind Kalian's eyes into the ocean of what waited there. Not devotion, but adoration. And beyond adoration, possession. The warp had learned the shape of love from Kalian, and it loved too much. The Emperor moved to strike him down. But the light that poured from Kalian's body was not flame nor lightning. It was memory. Images flooded the chamber. A child holding a mother's hand. A world before war. A sky unscarred by ash. Each vision hit like a blow of mercy. The Emperor faltered, because he remembered too.
Why fight me?
Kalian whispered.
We could end this. No more conquest, no more lies. You could be loved instead of obeyed.
The Emperor's expression was unreadable. Because love, he said, is the oldest form of surrender. And with that, he unleashed his full power. The vault erupted. The psychic blast vaporized metal and mind alike. Custodians died without sound. Null maidens vanished into smoke. The shockwave spread across the planet, shattering astropathic relays, silencing psychers mid-scream. In the warp, something screamed back. A god's attention had been drawn. Faint at first, like a sniff of curiosity through the void, then total. Slaanesh had not yet been born. But this moment was its first heartbeat. It smelled perfection, and it desired it. Kalian fell to one knee, light spilling from his wounds like liquid dawn. He looked up at his father and whispered something that would haunt the Emperor forever.
They love me, Father. Even you cannot unmake that.
And then, he was gone. Not slain, not destroyed, but claimed. A single pulse of psychic force rippled outward from where he had stood, and all light within the vault inverted. Gold turning to violet, harmony to discord, faith to ecstasy. The warp had eaten its first godling, and the Emperor, standing in the ruin of his first miracle, understood his first failure. He had tried to make perfection in a universe that could only devour it. They called it the Night of Unmaking. No record survives of it, because he ensured none would. The vault was buried beneath 100 meters of new stone and sacred alloy. Every corridor that led to it was collapsed with fusion charges. Every witness, mortal or transhuman, was summoned to the Emperor's hand. None returned. Even the Mechanicum's own memory engines were cleansed. Entire data vaults were reduced to molten slag, their machine spirits bound and gagged with prayer. The event never happened. The name Kalian was not erased. It was forgotten. But nothing in the warp is ever truly forgotten. The Emperor spent 9 days alone in the ruins of Vault Zero. For 9 days, the world above him grew silent. No ship left orbit. No order was given. The light over Terra dimmed as if the sun itself mourned. When he emerged, he no longer glowed. The gold that once bled from his skin had dulled to bronze. The warmth that filled rooms when he entered had cooled to neutrality. Those who looked upon him afterwards said he seemed smaller, not in form, but in presence, as though he had burned some essential piece of himself away to seal what he had unleashed. None dared ask what he had done to the creature that had called him father, but whispers spread. Some said he had cast Kalian into the heart of the warp and sealed the wound with his own blood. Others whispered that he had not destroyed him at all, that he had divided him, torn the essence apart, scattering its perfect fragments across 1,000 potential vessels, 1,000 gene patterns. And from those fragments, he would later shape the Primarchs, each one a shard of the first, each one carrying a fraction of that impossible perfection, diluted, caged, restrained. And the Custodes, they were built from what the Emperor dared not destroy. The first strain, born of Kalian's untainted flesh, the part that had not yet turned toward the warp, the fragment that had loved purely, to serve as reminder and as warning both. They were the reflection of what he had once wanted, soldiers who did not need gods, but would guard one forever. The Emperor never spoke of his first creation again, not even to Malkador, not even to the Primarchs when they came. But something in his gaze changed when he looked upon them. A flicker of sorrow behind the omnipotence, the faintest recognition of what had been before. When he beheld Sanguinius, he lingered longest. When he heard Magnus speak, he grew silent. When he watched Horus lead, he closed his eyes, because in each of them, he saw a different shadow of the same light. Millennia later, during the Great Crusade, strange anomalies haunted the gene forges of Luna. Custodians reported dreams of a voice that called them brother. Primarchs, those few sensitive to the psychic currents of their own making, dreamed of light behind the veil, of hands reaching through the warp to touch their faces. The Mechanicum dismissed it as neural feedback from psychic resonance. But the Emperor knew better. Something was moving inside the warp, something that had never truly died. He felt it like static between stars, faint, persistent longing. Every time the Astronomicon flared, it whispered back in a language older than thought. Father, I am still here. And in those moments, his concentration faltered. Orders delayed, visions clouded, dreams returned. He saw Kalian again, not radiant, not monstrous, but smiling. He saw him kneeling beside a human child, teaching it to stand. He saw him watching humanity without judgment, without command, a God who did not want to rule, only to love. And every time the vision ended, the Emperor woke with blood on his hands and the taste of iron in his mouth. He had killed the thing that might have saved him, and by doing so, had set in motion the cycle that would devour everything that followed. Because he learned the wrong lesson. He learned to fear perfection, not compassion. He learned to suppress love instead of understanding it. And from that seed of fear, the Imperium was born. In the centuries after his internment upon the Golden Throne, fragments of Vault Zero began to reappear. A splinter of psychic crystal found beneath the catacombs of the palace, pulsing with faint light. A scrap of parchment in an erased language, repeating a single phrase. He sang to the stars, and they answered. A fragment of genetic code, non-human, non-Primarch, impossibly pure, embedded deep within custodian gene archives. The Magi biologists who studied it noted something uncanny. When exposed to human DNA, it did not corrupt or mutate, it healed. They named it Pattern C01 for classification purposes only. But among the tech priests who whispered in the dark, it had another name, Kalian's heart. And when the most ancient of the custodians, those who remembered whispers that should not exist, looked upon that shimmering helix, they felt something stir deep within their perfect silence. Not command, not fear, but longing. As if a voice once buried beneath 10,000 years of obedience had begun to breathe again. You were never meant to guard me, the echo said. You were meant to be me. And for a moment, just a moment, every custodian on Terra hesitated. Their fingers trembled, their machine spirits quivered, and somewhere, deep beneath the Imperial Palace, in a vault sealed since before the age of Primarchs, something in the dark breathed. It began as a whisper in the gene forges of Terra. The custodians did not dream. They did not feel fatigue. They were crafted beyond such imperfections. And yet, one by one, they began to hear. The first was Alethion, oldest of the 10,000 still active in the Emperor's service. He had stood vigil since the siege, unmoving, a statue of gold and faith. But one night, as the palace slept beneath the endless drone of hymns, he heard a sound through the static of his own mind. Faint, melodic, impossible, a voice. Familiar, but not the Emperor's. Alethion, it said. Do you remember my name? He froze. His armor's machine spirits whirred in confusion, detecting no sound waves, no external input. But he heard it nonetheless. The syllables pressed against his consciousness, warm and kind. You were born from my light, the voice whispered, and still you hide in another's shadow. He fell to his knees. Across the Imperial Palace, similar moments unfolded. In the gene forges beneath Luna, a custodian trainee's neural patterns suddenly resonated with frequencies unrecorded by Mechanicum sensors. In the catacombs below the throne, a silent sister felt her null aura shiver, like it had been touched by something vast and tender. It spread quietly, like a secret that remembered itself. The Magi biologists panicked. They called it a psychogenic resonance event, a spiritual infection. The ecclesiarchy, learning of it too late, proclaimed it heresy within the holiest flesh. But the custodians knew. Somewhere deep inside they recognized the call. They remembered warmth before discipline, before obedience, before the silence of the throne. And then came the dream. Every custodian saw it, whether waking or asleep. A vast plain of glass stretching beneath a black sky. Upon it stood a figure, tall, radiant, gold bleeding into violet. His face was the Emperor's, and yet not. His expression was serene, sorrowful. You were never my guards, the figure said. You were my witnesses. You were my first son. They woke in unison, hearts pounding, a sensation they had not felt since their making. The palace sensors went haywire. Psychic static rippled through the webway gate. The Astronomicon dimmed for exactly 9 seconds, and then silence again. The Captain General convened the High Custodians in the Hall of Names. 40 golden giants knelt beneath the sigil of the Emperor, their armor gleaming in the reflected light of the throne's aura. The air trembled with tension. No one speaks of this, said the Captain General. His voice was low, dangerous. Whatever it is not divine. It is not him, but Alethion rose. His armor's joints hissed softly as he stepped forward, breaking the perfection of the circle. And yet, it feels like him, he said. It feels like what he once was. Several heads turned. The faint hum of power fields flared as the Captain General's grip tightened on his guardian spear. Blasphemy, he said. Memory, Alethion replied. Do you not recall what we were before words like that mattered? Before the throne, before obedience replaced thought? No one answered, for they all remembered, in some buried place, what he spoke of. The time before the 10,000 were perfect, when they still asked why. Alethion looked at them, at brothers he had stood beside for millennia, and saw fear in their eyes for the first time. not of death, of doubt. What if he failed before us? He said softly. What if the Emperor made one before all others? And that one was what we truly are. The chamber's light flickered. Static ran through the Vox relays. A sound filled the air, faint, harmonic, like distant singing through water. And from the walls themselves came the whisper, "You are not my failure." Panic rippled through the custodian's psychic lattice. Armor systems rebooted, helmets sealed. But it was too late. The resonance had already taken root. The song spread through their gene code like memory rediscovered, awakening neural pathways that had lain dormant since the day of their creation. Visions filled their minds. Of Vault Zero, of light so bright it cast shadows through time. They saw him, Kalian, the first, not devoured, not destroyed, but transformed. A being half matter, half idea, woven into the warp structure itself. He was alive, scattered across every custodian's blood, every fragment of engineered perfection that bore his imprint. They felt his presence rising from within, and for the first time since the Siege of Terror, the 10,000 wept. Some fell to their knees, armor trembling. Others tore off their helms, faces streaked with tears and oil. And still others, those most loyal, most fearful, raised weapons against their own, shouting the only prayer they remembered, "The Emperor protects." Gold clashed against gold. Blades meant to defend the throne tore through kin. The Hall of Names became a slaughterhouse of light and devotion. The Captain General struck Alethian through the chest, his guardian spear piercing both armor and soul. But as the blade went in, Alethian smiled, serene, unafraid. "He never needed our protection," he said, blood mixing with golden ichor. "He needed our forgiveness." Then the light burst from within him. Every lumen in the chamber exploded outward in a wave of radiance so pure it turned shadow into dust. The palace trembled. Across Terra, mortals fell to their knees as an unseen warmth touched their hearts. A brief, impossible pulse that felt like love. When it faded, Alethion's armor lay empty. But from it, rising slowly toward the vaulted ceiling, drifted a plume of golden mist. It shimmered, coalesced, just long enough to take the vague shape of a man with kind eyes, before dissolving into nothing. And somewhere, deep within the webway beneath the palace, a single, ancient vault door shuddered open for the first time in 10,000 years. The air beneath the palace tasted of iron and incense. Even the machines seemed to hold their breath. In the aftermath of Alethian's death, silence ruled. The Hall of Names lay shattered. Golden armor scattered across marble, machine spirits flickering like dying candles. The survivors stood motionless, weapons lowered, unsure whether to pray or purge themselves. Then they felt it. A vibration, faint, rhythmic, older than the stone itself, coming from below. The webway tunnels groaned. Dust drifted from the ceiling like falling ash. Somewhere in the catacombs, mechanisms that had not moved since the Dark Age began to hum. One custodian, Valoris, the Captain General himself, turned toward the deepest access shaft, the one sealed with a triple lock that bore the Emperor's personal sigil. No one had ever opened it. No one even knew what lay beneath. Now it was open. The door stood half ajar, gold bent inward, as though pushed from the other side. Warm light leaked through the gap, soft, pulsing, familiar. No one spoke. They didn't have to. Every custodian felt the same pull. an instinct older than obedience, written into their gene code. Valoris ordered the palace sealed. No astropathic transmissions, no mechanicum access. The upper citadel went dark, its staff quietly removed. Only the 10,000 remained. They descended into the dark. The lower levels of the palace were not meant for human eyes. Walls carved from pre-imperial stone bled faint heat, humming with buried circuits. Symbols, older than the imperial truth, older than the mechanicum, pulsed faintly along the corridors. They moved with purpose, like veins carrying some ancient pulse. The further they went, the stronger the light grew. When they reached the final chamber, the custodians froze. Vault Zero had awoken. The seals that once bound it were gone, peeled away like petals. The air shimmered with energy, not heat, but memory. It smelled of old sanctity, of oil and sunlit marble, of a time before fear had a name. And at its center stood the containment sphere, cracked, empty, but alive. Golden particles drifted within it, orbiting an invisible core. Tiny motes of light swirling in perfect harmony, forming and dissolving symbols faster than the human eye could register. Each one shimmered like a thought half remembered. One of the custodians, Tyrannis, youngest among them, stepped forward. "Is this him?" he asked softly. Valoris's voice was low, almost reverent. "No, this is the echo." And yet, when the particles stirred, a voice filled the chamber. "You came back." It wasn't sound. It was memory given form. Each custodian heard it in his own tongue, his own heartbeat. The resonance filled the air, crawling under armor, through bone. "I waited," the voice said. "I waited for you to remember." Tyrannis fell to his knees. "Who are you?" he whispered. "Your beginning," it said, "and your end." The motes of light condensed, forming the vague outline of a man. Tall, radiant, features indistinct yet familiar. The resemblance was unmistakable. It was the Emperor's face, but younger, gentler, unscarred by will. Valoris took a step forward, spear raised. "Identify yourself." The light smiled. "You already know my name. You carry it in your blood." The custodian stiffened. Something in their veins responded, an electric pulse racing through their hearts in unison. Their armor's systems flickered. For a heartbeat, every suit glowed with faint gold beneath the crimson of Mars-forged steel. Kellyan's voice filled their minds. "You are not meant to be weapons. You are meant to be memory. The Emperor feared what I was, but he could not destroy me. He hid me in you." Valoris gritted his teeth. "You are not him. You are what he cast out." "I am what he loved," the light answered, "and what he feared." The chamber trembled. Behind them, the sealed doors began to close, locking automatically. The vault wanted witnesses, but not escapees. The Captain General leveled his spear. "We were forged to guard the master of mankind, not his mistakes." The light pulsed brighter. "Then why does your heart ache when I speak?" Valoris hesitated. Because it did. A warmth spread through every custodian present, soft, aching, impossible. For the first time since their making, they felt grief. Not programmed loyalty, not sacred duty. Real sorrow, the kind that precedes forgiveness. "You were made from me," Kellyan said. "I am not asking you to worship, only to remember." Images burst through their minds, flashes of a past they had never lived. They saw the Emperor crafting light from thought. They saw Kellyan smiling, speaking to them before they existed, naming them my brothers. They saw his death, not as violence, but a surrender. And the last thing he whispered before the warp took him: "If ever the throne falls silent, tell them I love them." The visions ended. Silence. Only the hum of ancient machinery and the soft sound of breathing. Valoris's spear lowered. One custodian began to weep openly. Another fell to his knees. A third backed away in horror. "This is deception," he hissed. "A demonic masquerade." Kellyan's light flickered. Not in anger, but sorrow. "If I were a demon," he said, "I would ask you to kneel. I am asking you to stand." The chamber shook. The vault's core pulsed once, twice, and then began to collapse inward, like a star folding into itself. Valoris shouted an order, but his voice was lost in the roar of energy. The light reached for them, not to burn, but to touch. And for the briefest instant, all of them saw the truth. The Emperor's first creation had not been devoured. He had been woven into the warp, the first sacrifice to hold it back. His song had anchored the human soul against chaos for millennia, hidden within the flesh of his father's greatest guards. And now, that song was ending. The vault imploded. When the dust cleared, the custodians were alone again. The chamber was dark. The sphere was gone. Only one thing remained, carved into the stone where the light had been. You were never his failure. They stood there for a long time, not speaking. When they finally emerged from the catacombs, the Astronomicon flared, brighter than it had in centuries. For one heartbeat across the galaxy, humanity dreamed of sunlight. Then it faded, the light dimmed, and silence returned. But the custodians who had witnessed it were changed. They no longer looked at the throne as before, because they knew now what it meant to be perfect, and why perfection must always die. They sealed Vault Zero again. No banners, no hymns, no witnesses. Just 23 survivors standing in the dark, armor scorched, hearts heavy. The Captain General gave no order. None was needed. Every man there understood that what they had seen could never exist in the Imperium's truth. The Emperor's first failure had awoken, and they had loved it. Valoris stood before the new seal, a wall of molten adamantium now cooling to dull grey. His voice was a whisper, but the vault heard him. "You are not forgotten." Behind his visor, his eyes burned with the reflection of dying gold. He turned and walked away. It took 7 hours to reach the upper citadel, 7 hours in which no one spoke. The corridors that had always echoed with hymns of the Emperor were silent now. The statues of the Primarchs seemed smaller, their eyes blind marble instead of glory. When they reached the Hall of Names, they found it restored, the damage erased, as though the massacre had never occurred. The Emperor's will had repaired his house, but the air still smelled faintly of blood. Valoris dismissed the others. "We will speak of this never again," he said. They saluted, slow ritual motions that felt hollow now, and departed into the endless corridors of duty. When he was alone, Valoris approached the central shrine, where the golden effigy of the Emperor sat upon a lesser throne. He stared at it for a long time. "Was this your plan?" he murmured. The statue said nothing. The silence answered enough. He removed his helmet. His breath steamed in the cold. "If you made him before us, then we are his shadow. If you feared him, then we are the fear you built to contain yourself." He reached out and touched the base of the statue. The metal was warm. For a heartbeat, he thought he felt it pulse beneath his hand. One slow beat, like a sleeping heart, He withdrew his hand quickly. Later, in his private sanctum, Valoris activated a restricted Vox recorder, a relic from the days when words were still trusted more than thought. Its surface was scarred, its spirit old but loyal. "This will not be entered into record," he said aloud. "It will not pass the Mechanicum's eyes. It is for whoever comes after us, if any ever do." He paused, the weight of 10,000 years pressing down like gravity. "We discovered a vault beneath the palace," he began, "older than the throne, older than any record of unification. Inside we found a voice that called itself our beginning. It spoke truth I cannot deny. I felt it in the marrow of my making." He hesitated. Every word was a betrayal, every truth a sin. "The Emperor created something before us, a son named Kalian. He was perfect, too perfect. The warp desired him. When the Emperor struck him down, he did not destroy him. He wove him into us." He exhaled, the sound rasping through metal lungs. "That light lives still. It waits, patient, beneath the throne. It does not hate him. It does not love him. It only remembers." He leaned forward, the recorder humming softly. "I have served for 10,000 years. I have killed and guarded and believed. But I tell you this, the Emperor is not our beginning. He is our burden. We are the echo of what he feared most, the part of himself that could love without control." The Vox crackled. His voice softened. "If he should ever awaken, tell him I forgave him." He ended the recording. Then he sat in silence for a long time, staring at the gold of his gauntlets until it no longer looked like light, only metal. That night, the palace dreamed. Every servo, every lumen, every human sleeping beneath its walls. They dreamed of sunlight on water, of a man standing on a shore made of glass. He held no weapon, wore no crown. He simply watched the horizon as dawn broke across a sky that was neither day nor night. When the people of Terra woke, they felt something they could not name. For 1 hour, fear receded. The ecclesiarchy called it a miracle of the throne. The Mechanicum called it a psychic anomaly. The custodians said nothing. They simply stood their watch, eyes turned not toward the throne, but toward the east, where the first light touched the sky. In the deeper vaults, long after the noise of the world faded, the sealed chamber of Vault Zero stirred once more. The metal did not move, the stone did not break, but through the microfractures, golden dust drifted upward, infinitesimal, luminous. It floated like breath, like pollen, carried by air that should not exist. Through conduits and vents it rose, through forgotten passages, until it reached the upper halls, until it reached the throne room. It hovered there, unseen, before the Emperor's face. The dust swirled, coalescing into a single filament of light, a whisper that brushed the air beside his dead ear. "You taught me silence," it said. "Now listen." The throne's machinery groaned. For an instant, the Emperor's aura flickered, not brighter, but softer, as though something within the light had turned to listen. Then it was gone. The adepts attending the throne saw only a brief surge in output. They recorded it, marked it as anomalous, and continued their eternal vigil. But the custodians below felt it, all of them. A pulse in the blood, a single thought that was not command, but communion. We are one. Days later, the Captain General disappeared. His quarters were found empty, his armor folded neatly on its stand. His guardian spear rested against the wall, blade sheathed. No breach, no struggle, only a thin trail of golden dust leading toward the catacombs. searchers found nothing. The ecclesiarchy demanded explanation. The Senatorum Imperialis whispered of treason among the 10,000. But the custodians offered no answer. They knew Valoris had gone where all beginnings end. Beneath the palace, through walls older than time, through the sealed corridors no man dared walk, he followed the whisper. It led him to the last door, the one that bore no sigil, no lock, the one that had never truly closed. He stepped through. Light engulfed him, not blinding, not searing, gentle. It smelled of oil and sun and the first dawn over terror. And standing within it was Kalian, not radiant now, but human. Barefoot, eyes calm, arms open. "You kept your promise," Kalian said. Valoris sank to one knee. "I was made to protect perfection," he said. "I failed." "No," the being replied. "You endured." "That was all I ever asked." He reached out a hand. The Captain General hesitated, then took it. Where their fingers met, gold turned to light. "The Emperor still sleeps," Valoris said. "If you wake him—" "I will not," Kalian interrupted. "He dreamed me once. Now let him dream himself free. My place is not upon the throne. My place is within those who remember why it was built." He stepped closer. "Tell them nothing. Let the Imperium believe. Let it worship. Every prayer they give him is a fragment of me, returned. That is enough." Valoris nodded slowly. "And when they forget again?" Kalian smiled, the same sad smile he had worn 10,000 years ago in the vault. "Then I will remind them." The light expanded, folding over the Captain General, dissolving armor, flesh, and memory into radiance. When it faded, there was no body, no trace. Only a single line burned into the stone. The first light never dies. In the throne room, the Emperor's machinery hummed. A new tone threaded through the endless mechanical chant. Higher, purer, like a faint note of song, buried in static. The tech priests could not identify its source. They called it interference. They were wrong. It was harmony. Somewhere in the warp, where the immaterium touches the dreams of men, a shape moved, vast and human, its face aglow with dawn. It did not speak, it only watched. The storm around it stilled for a heartbeat. The screaming of the gods faltered. Even Slaanesh, oldest child of hunger, turned a gaze of curiosity toward the light and whispered, "So the first still sings." And the song went on, through the Astronomicon, through every prayer, through every moment a mortal dared to hope. Not divine, not perfect, simply enduring. Somewhere on Terra, a novice custodian stood his first watch upon the Eternity Gate. He felt something stir behind his ribs. Warmth, fleeting but real. He looked toward the dawn. And though he did not know why, he smiled. Because in that instant, the impossible truth brushed his soul. The Emperor's first failure had never been a mistake. It had been the beginning. The light of Kalian lived still, not in vaults, nor in gods, but in every heart that remembered how to hope.
Remember to like and subscribe for more Warhammer 40K videos. Comment down below what your favorite part was and what we should make next.